We should talk about the specifics of the Sony showcase that is coming soon. Welcome everybody to the video version of this. This is from the What Culture Gaming podcast feed, the wind-up that me and Josh do every Monday.
It's a lovely little show.
It's a lovely little show. Please go subscribe to the What Culture Gaming podcast feed, where you can get a selection of podcasts every week and little select chunks we will put on in video form. So yeah, we're going to break down the upcoming PlayStation showcase, which is yet to be officially revealed. However, it's doing the rounds in all the rumor circles, and the more people keep talking about it, it seems like there'll be an official announcement very soon, which, if you keep up with the video side of things, you follow us along on the news, every time we do a news video about something that's rumored, it tends to break as we're talking about it. So chances are there's probably an official statement out there by now anyway. So yeah, the few different mentions of this. Jeff Grubb over at Giant Bomb, he's also got the Jeff Grubb Games Mess podcast.
Yeah, he does.
Saying that the showcase will happen at the latest by May 25th. The last PlayStation showcase you found or you looked into was September 2021.
Blew my mind, that,
Ridiculous.
by the way. Obviously, state of play since then, but the last major PlayStation showcase, billed as a showcase, September 2021. Crazy.
So they have loads of different things to catch up on. We also had a regular leaker, Tom Henderson, saying that so far he knows nothing about what's coming. That makes it really, really exciting. But if you start going, looking a little bit wider, there are various rumors that have been doing the rounds the last few months that make sense if you wanted to turn the eyes of the world in your direction. You would cover the likes of the things that we're going to get into. So we'll break these things down. The first one is the new Sony handheld. It doesn't have a name yet, but I put this at the top because I feel like if they want to just go, hey, we recognize the Switch as a thing. There's apparently a new Sony handheld coming. This was reported by Tom Henderson over on Insider Gaming. Apparently, though, it's remote play only. It seems like it's made for households and not on the go, which I think is a ludicrous misstep.
Yeah, I also agree with you here. The Switch famously won me round to the idea of handhelds. I was never a handheld fan before the Switch hybridized the entire approach to being a docked console or being something you can play on the go. And that got me excited about the potential for Sony to revitalize their Vita section and release maybe a Vita 2 that has the amazing functionality that the Vita had, but actually appealed to people, and people would want to buy it, maybe with Sony's newfound, not newfound, but kind of re-emergence on top again after the PS3 era and like the early days of the PS4. Now that they have all of these games that people want to play, why not give them the option to play that on a dedicated handheld? So when this news was kind of first doing the rounds, I got really excited, and then like you said, it's apparently like a cloud-based thing or some kind of remote play style thing, which is cool to have, but it's not the return to the handheld space that we want, I don't think, necessarily.
The thing with me, because I love the PlayStation Vita, and anyone who has a Vita knows that was one of the most overlooked systems in PlayStation history or in console history by itself. And Sony very much shot themselves in the foot right at the end of that system's reveal by saying that it had a separate storage. You had to buy PlayStation first-party storage memory cards, and that was very much one of the main things that killed it off. I think that the landscape is a lot more open to handheld first-party games now, like the idea of console games on the go. So them doing this makes so much sense, but then they've kind of handicapped themselves again by just saying, like, actually it's, well, in theory, the report so far is just saying that it'll be remote play only. Maybe that's just not the case when we get the official announcement, but
maybe not.
I don't know.
I suppose it would make sense. It would be consistent with what they've done before. They kind of made a push for remote play in the PS4 era, and that was well received enough. It wasn't this mass adoption thing, but it was a nice option to have. And I think that's it's going to come down to their messaging and their marketing. How are they going to convey what this thing is? Are they going to try to sell it as a proper handheld, or are you going to try to sell it as just a nice option for players who kind of want to take their PS5 games remote? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but Xbox already has a similar system to
they let you
accomplish
stream
that.
stuff. I mean, yeah, kind of similar thing the PlayStation has. Like, you can get your Android phone, get whatever, and go play in bed with a sort of attached device. Like, yeah, Xbox has been all over that stuff in terms of the various different systems you can bolt onto a phone. Yeah, maybe there's like big numbers there, and they're just thinking, hey, if we just give people a specific first-party alternative to having to faff with controller options for a phone, that maybe there's a whole market there that I just don't know about. There's a whole bunch of people playing first-party PlayStation or Xbox games on their phones, and they would rather have a handheld device to connect it better. We'll see, though. That's just one of the rumors that's been doing the rounds for a while. The next thing down is Xbox Era's Nick Baker saying that there'll be a PlayStation 3, Metal Gear Solid 3 remake as exclusive to PlayStation. This has been doing the rounds for ages. Honestly, ever since the Pachinko version of Metal Gear came out.
Yeah, a long time ago.
Where all the cutscenes were remade for Metal Gear Solid 3. But yeah, this has been rumored quite a lot, backed up by Jez Corden from Windows Central. But yeah, as a talking point, this is a long time coming.
It absolutely absolutely is. It's almost a joke at this point, right? It's either going to be Metal Gear Solid original, Metal Gear Solid 3, but like you said, you know, everyone's kind of pointing towards 3 because of those pachinko machines and because of other rumors that, you know, people might be back in the studio, people might be re-recording some music for it. They've already got HD versions of the cutscenes. Everything is kind of in place for them to kind of put their hands together and just release it.
David Brenda.
But, you know, I think it's interesting if it is true. Like, obviously, Metal Gear Solid 3 is the start of the timeline, you know, canonically in terms of every major story in that series. But it's an interesting one to kind of start with if you're going to go about remaking those games.
Yes. That's the weird thing is like, why would you start with Metal Gear Solid 3? To some degree, it's the fan favorite, but it's like if you've only ever heard of Metal Gear, what's the big deal with this franchise? And you gave someone Metal Gear Solid 3 as their first one, they would get it. They would get why it's so over the top, and it is this East meets West anime-infused approach to action movies. But the story in 3, I mean, that retroactively would spoil all the stuff in 2, like all the stuff with the Patriots and where they started. And like, because at the time, obviously 2, then 3, it was filling out the history of them. I just think 3 is a weird starting point, but maybe they have data on this that we don't know.
I mean, like you said, I think it is a fan favorite, so I'm sure there is data, and I will absolutely buy it. It's just always a question with Metal Gear of, you know, how do you kind of onboard, for lack of a better term, a new audience into the franchise? Like, where do you start? For me, MGS1 has always been the most ripe for a remake because I love the original version of that game. You know, I love its atmosphere, I love its PS1 style gameplay, but obviously, kind of like Resident Evil 2, there's been such a gulf in technology since that game came out that, you know, you could reinterpret that game in a bunch of different ways that make it feel like a significant overhaul and a significant remake. Whereas I think with MGS3, because that kind of plays so well and still has a lot of modern trappings, even if, you know, parts of it are definitely dated mechanically, you kind of already got a great version of it that you can hold up with the MGS 2, 3, and Peace Walker HD collection. Like, those games still are great and are very accessible today.
That's the thing, right? Because for me, it was like, because overall, Konami are trying to get back in the gaming space. They have been doing various collections like the TMNT stuff, and like they're sort of reminding people I mean, there's another Konami thing to get to as well, but I feel like overall, they're sort of just nuzzling people, go, we're still here. We've got some things.
Yeah.
But I also think in that regard, you know, an idea of a Metal Gear Solid 3 remake makes financial sense, whatever, because they have the cutscenes already ready, or the majority of them for the pachinko machine. Also, MGS3 Subsistence, I think, is the only Metal Gear before 4 that has the 3D camera over the shoulder already prototyped. Like, those levels already work.
Right, yeah.
Whereas 1 and 2, obviously you got Twin Snakes, but like they were never really done that way. So maybe that's another thing where it's like, well, we can upscale all the textures and everything. We already know that the level meshes will all work. It depends how deluxe a remake this is.
I think it's, well, that's another question before I jump into my next point. Like, what do you want them to do with an MGS3 remake? Do you want to see a proper Resi 2 style overhaul, or do you just want the original game touched up with HD textures that were originally in the game? Like, I'm gonna say this, but I don't mean the baggage that came with this release. Do you want it to be more in the style of GTA Definitive Edition if that game was, you know, good and working, or would you want to see it more of a Resi 2 style project?
I would take the GTA Definitive Edition upscale. Spyro is maybe another example of that too, where it's just you take the feel and you just change the graphics. I don't necessarily need much to change about the way that MGS3 feels. Although you could modernize the controls and stuff, the feel of it in general. Those games are really unique. Like, if you go back to them now, like we're talking about, we're right on the cusp of, you know, just before Resident Evil 4, and it's like that sort of way before Gears of War, like games that we're experimenting with over the shoulder, or like aiming down sights. Like that was a whole magazine article back in the day. You can aim down the sights in MGS3. So yeah, for me, it's like, it depends how much they think that stuff has aged well. For me, if I'm replaying Metal Gears, I know to accept that stuff and expect that stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I'm thrown off by them just doing MGS3. I just think I don't know who's asking for that as the first one. I think that's just kind of crazy.
I mean, like I said, I kind of get it. It's the starting point in the timeline. It would work in a way to introduce you to Big Boss and all of the backstory before you maybe jumped into 1. And I think more importantly, perhaps, and this is my wild theory that I've just thought about right now. You know how nostalgia cycles work? You know, like every 20, 30 years or whatever. In this case, it's 20. There's a lot of 2000s nostalgia going on right now.
Yeah.
Not just in the gaming space, but across music and television and fashion, all of that stuff.
Space Jam theme on the Diablo trailer. Sure.
Yeah, early 2000s stuff is in right now. We've seen that in games with, Resident Evil 4, with other games that I just had in my brain and now I've completely
Dead Space is a mid-2000s
Dead
one.
Space is a mid-2000 one. There was another great example that I've just completely blanked on.
Metroid Prime Remastered?
Maybe Metroid Prime Remastered. No, there was something else that was really good and it's completely gone. I promise it was a really good point.
Cool.
But the point is, MGS3 nicely slides into that general era. Silent Hill 2 was the other one I was thinking of. Silent Hill 2. But MGS3 kind of sits into that like nice PS2 era that we have a lot of fun memories for.
Yes.
And I wonder whether that kind of nostalgia cycle in some ways kind of, motivating these games to kind of get remakes now rather than a few years ago or a few years down the line.
Yeah, they better not be skipping over all the 90s.
They better
I want
not.
the board shorts, the Limp Bizkit revivals. I need all that stuff.
Hey,
please.
I want MGS1. This is all I'm saying. I want MGS1 and I want Silent Hill 1 as well. Silent Hill 1 and MGS1.
Silent Hill.
Really, it was a great game. And I want both of those games to be more accessible or remade.
Yeah,
please.
I think if you're going to delve back into that catalog, I think it's weird taking the reputation that entire franchise had over time and then delving in and going like, well, people like that one the most, like with Silent Hill and remaking 2. And it's like, this doesn't necessarily work if you're actually trying to get new fans in. Because like, I guess we'll see how well Silent Hill 2 sells or whether this would sell well. But for me, I would be immediately confused that I was joining at the wrong point, trying to come in and try and experience this thing that I missed out on.
Well, it's funny you should say that, but Resident Evil 2 remake sold like gangbusters, even though while...
They did have the 1 remake.
They did, but it was like...
a while ago.
It was like, literally 15 years previously. So I wouldn't even necessarily count that as part of that quote-unquote project because it plays so different. There was such a gulf of time between them that I think to a lot of people, they would be like, well, where is Resident Evil 1? Because even if you went and bought that game, you'd maybe be disappointed because it's not in the style of 2, 3, and 4 remake.
At least they were available because they did that whole thing in like, what the hell was that, 2015 when they remade the remake and they put the GameCube one out again and it was finally available on new consoles and everything. So at least if you searched on a search bar Resident Evil on your console, at least you get that. Okay, I should start here and whatever, but you don't have that for Metal Gear. Like you might go searching for Metal Gear Solid 2 and just not be able to find it. And I guess there's the HD version, kinda, but whatever. Something else from Windows Central's Jez Corden. He tweeted on May 7th that he's heard Sony landed a deal with Konami for Silent Hill, Metal Gear, and maybe even a new Castlevania. This is something that has done the rounds a few times. I think we've done a video on this. It just kind of pops up every now and then with various insiders. We should just talk about the reality of if that's true. Like, we've got all these conversations going on with Xbox and the CMA and trying to acquire Activision Blizzard and the idea of the acquisition wars doing the rounds. And then Sony are yet to make that many moves, big moves in that regard. Like, they've bought Bungie, they sort of bought a bunch of mobile teams. But we're yet to see there's always the rumors of Square Enix being acquired or maybe Capcom or something. And Konami, as we've long theorized that they would make a deal with Sony because they would do all the heavy lifting, all the dev work and everything, and Konami just get to cash the check at the end of the month.
Absolutely, and I think it's a good deal to have. I think the difference between Microsoft and Sony, and I've said this before, and it's not necessarily a novel thought, but Microsoft come in with the big bucks, like you said, buy publishers and developers outright, whereas Sony, until recently anyway, are more likely to make a deal with a publisher. They're more likely to make a deal with Square Enix to get Final Fantasy 16 on their platform and Final Fantasy 7 Remake on their platform. They're more likely to go to Konami and say, can we cut a deal where we don't take you over or anything? We might not even take development in-house necessarily, but we'll cut a deal and all of your games are now exclusive to us. We know you kind of like the money. Do you want the money?
Do you want some money?
You don't have to do much at all. We'll take control. We'll, use our good reputation to re-bolster your failing franchises that aren't doing necessarily well under your sole oversight. I just think it makes sense from a business thing. It made sense when it first broke the other year. It's kind of been surprising that it's a rumor that's kind of come and gone, and it seems to be back on the pile, I suppose.
Do you remember when Bluepoint did that really weird cryptic tweet where they seemed to hint at about 5 things at once?
Yeah.
Maybe this has been in the works since then, and they are actually going to be the first-party remake studio or the first-party... Because it's always that thing where they did Shadow of the Colossus. They are known for these big deluxe remakes, but we never really saw what that... I mean, they did Demon Souls. It was one of those things where it felt like there were more references in that tweet than what we actually got.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if they've had some sort of top-end meeting of like, you guys, you're the guys that we give the IP IPs to, and you revitalize them, or you remake classic installments. If they remake Symphony of the Night, or if they I'm trying to think of a big Symphony of the Night. I don't know if that would lend itself very well to a AAA 2023 style thing because it's fundamentally side-scrolly. But if they do something that has that kind of stature, and then it's on Sony, it's on PlayStation to get it right, and that bolsters Konami's reputation and everything, I could totally see that happening.
Well, I think the rumor for a while was that Blue Point might be doing the MGS original remake, but I think that's a little bit rocky right now. And it's been 3 years, like you said, since they launched Demon's Souls, so they've definitely got something.
Has it been 3 years since Demon's Souls?
Now. At the end of this year, it'll be 3 years since Demon's Souls.
Sickening.
I know how time goes, how time flies. Should I say?
How time slaps you in the face.
How time, picks you up, throws you against the wall, son, and knocks you out. What was I saying? Something about Demon's Souls, Blue Point. Yeah. Yes. I think the big question is, are they going to team up with Konami and do something in the Metal Gear world or in the Castlevania world or Silent Hill or whatever?
Just do a Netflix one.
Here's the thing.
Go on.
Or will Sony look at the success of Demon's Souls and how well that was received and say, well, we've got this other game we co-made with From Software called Bloodborne that you might want to remake after you've just, taken on Demon's Souls. You've got the caliber, you've got the quality, and we've got this beloved IP we've done nothing with for like 8 years now. Can you please do something with this, please? Make it move.
You're like the most open goal they've had for years, like you said. The kind of thing that they could just drop and say, hey, by the way, it's available now, that would send ructions across social media. That is so obvious to do when it's been September 2021 since their last showcase.
Yes.
They need eyeballs to take notice of what's happening for the rest of the year. Just do the Bloodborne remake.
I mean, look, I'm not saying this is something nice that anyone should do, but Elden Ring just sold all the copies in the world, and if I was Sony, I'd want to leech a little bit of that and be like...
From the makers of Elden Ring?
Yeah, from the makers of Elden Ring. We've got this PlayStation exclusive that a lot of people like. It kind of plays like Elden Ring in a way,
just get
and we've got a lovely remake of it. All I'm saying is, this is a company that is currently remaking Horizon Zero Dawn, and if they remake Horizon Zero Dawn, why wouldn't they do Bloodborne? We are in this weird era of remakes where even if a game is less than 10 years old, it's going to get remade and be announced. And again, I'm not saying that's a good thing, but I can see them doing it because there's money to be made. And there's a positive fan response if they do it.
I, for one, completely forgot they were remaking Zero Dawn.
I like to push it out my
relive that
brain.
trauma yet again.
Yeah.
It's I guess we are going to get that again. Jez Corden also mentioned in his tweet thread about various things that might may or may not happen. Just a little tease there, just saying if you're a Capcom fan or a Dead Rising fan, keep an eye on things going forward. Now, we don't know if that refers to the Sony conference or refers to other things, but again, something worth talking about. Dead Rising as a franchise, as an IP, there's an attempt was made to reframe the tone of that series in Dead Rising 4, massively tanked, completely bombed. They did have a Dead Rising 5 in production, which leaked, I think, last year.
Yes.
People got to see what that was going to be like. Do you care about Dead Rising in 2023?
I do. I really do. I saw people in the comments to this announcement, maybe on the Gaming Leaks Reddit, saying like remake. And again, I know we're talking a lot about remakes, but remake Dead Rising 1, because Dead Rising 1 is still so good. It holds up so well. It's a great game, a unique game with interesting mechanics that the franchise kind of, just binned off as it went along to try and get a bigger mainstream audience. But I have a soft spot for Dead Rising. I've just a bunch of the games I've not even played. I didn't touch 4 myself.
Right.
But I have a fondness for it, and I would like to see it come back, but only if it can be done right, and if it's not just going to be another bland open world zombie kill fest, which is what people called the first game, but it was way more than that. It had way more to it mechanically. It was more of a survival horror game in terms of its mechanics, even though its tone was very much a goof off,
a big old goof
between Frank West and the psychopaths as they were known. But like I said, I'm fond of it, and I want it done right, whether that's on Xbox or whether that's on PlayStation.
I have by far the fondest memories of Dead Rising 1.
Yeah.
Like you said, that game is so overlooked for what it actually was. Like you said, it gets referred to as this almost like a Musou game, where it's like a Dynasty Warriors, where you're just taking out loads of zombies all at once.
Yeah.
But it had way more threat to it than that. You did get used to being there. But yeah, you had all the timers and all the idea of managing your days and like trying to save people. And yeah, dude, maybe do that again.
Come on, guys.
Remember what the core of the IP.
Here's the thing.
Do it.
Capcom has kind of been on a roll for a little while now. We talked about Resident Evil there, with the exception of maybe Resi 3, which even then wasn't that bad. They've kind of had success after success. Devil May Cry is in a really good place. Monster Hunter is in an exceptional place.
No Dino Crisis, though.
Well,
Exoprimal.
Yet.
What's that?
But Dead, I keep calling it Dead Island. Dead Rising. Why not, modern Capcom take that title and do it well. Don't give us the Resi 6 version of that franchise. Give us the Resi 2 version of that franchise.
You kind of already have the tech from the RE2, 3, and 4 remakes. Use the RE engine. Get a little gore going there. You could blow some limbs off.
I like the sweet nothings you're whispering to me right now.
That's what I'm saying. So we also have, this is just in a wider sense, there's a new AAA project that's already in motion. It was reported on last October by VGC, by Video Games Chronicle, in 2022, from a combination of staff from Naughty Dog and also from Visual Arts. This is just a way of saying that there might be a brand new IP alongside all the remakes, alongside all the expected stuff. It's a weird thing because I feel like we just talked about a bunch of remakes and that idea of, like you said, it's not like you only want remakes, but I feel like that's the thing. I need the new stuff. I feel like when the PS5 was announced, we got so many games that were announced, even if they were just teaser trailers or whatever that we haven't heard from. That game that looked a bit like Death Stranding, the one with the little astronaut and the little girl.
Pragmata, I think that was called.
And what happened to that? Stuff like that, where they sort of said, like, new IPs, guys, that's the future. And then we've had a remake generation so far. Yeah. And so, or like an iterative sequel so far. So I'm curious if there's something that was built from the ground up for the PlayStation 5, take full advantage of the SSD, and you had full creative, there's no creative limits. What did the staff from Naughty Dog and Visual Arts come up with?
Yes.
I really want to see that.
That's the exciting thing, because when I was, thinking about this showcase and what Sony might have to show, I love a lot of the stuff that's probably on the docket. All the remakes we've talked about there, sequels to Ghost of Tsushima. We've obviously got Spider-Man 2. We've got Wolverine.
We're going to run down Josh Brown.
Oh, we're going to run down
Josh Brown's games that might be there.
Josh Brown's games that might
We've
be
got
there.
notes for days.
Those are just some of the sequels that are almost certainly going to be there, and some of the surprises that might happen all seem to be based around sequels. But like you said, last year was so spectacular because it was so full of new IP or returning franchises rebooted in an interesting way, like God of War. Whereas this time, we kind of know what the stuff is going to be. That doesn't make it any less exciting, but you kind of want to see what the PS5's flagship new IP is going to be. And more importantly, who's that going to come from? We know the Days Gone studio, Sony Bend, is working on a new IP. We know Naughty Dog probably has a new IP in development somewhere. Whether that comes out before the next Last of Us or whatever is unknown at the moment. But it's like, could this game between Visual Arts, Naughty Dog, and this new studio, could that be one of the defining games of the PS5? It's way too early to tell, but I want at least the hype of that. That might be possible.
That we're 3 years in does kind of compound that you don't have that many games that you need a PS5 to play. I know I'm a broken record with that sentiment, but I still want stuff that I can just hold up in a genuine positive sense and go, you need to play this, you need to see this. Not that they don't exist at all.
You ever played Returnal? Returnal is what I'm holding right now.
It's not Returnal. It's not Returnal. Returnal's all right. Returnal's all right. It's not what I want. Speaking of new things, though, the next Bungie IP, this was trademarked years ago, way before the acquisition. Sony acquired Bungie in January 2022. But they registered a trademark for the name Matter, and there was a piece of artwork that came alongside it. So it seemed like they had an idea in motion for whatever the next IP was going to be from Bungie, their first IP since Destiny. And like we said, they got acquired by Sony, so it would make sense to then, even if it's only at the teaser stage, to be like, hey, the next game from the creators of Destiny. Like, as rocky as Destiny 1 was, and as weird as that trajectory of that IP was, Destiny, and especially Destiny 2, are just insanely popular, massively influential, even though Destiny 1 did land in a state. I feel like everybody is still, like Suicide Squad, trying to make a 4-person co-op looter shooter. And you kind of hope that they move on from that and Matter isn't another Destiny. Like, I don't know what Bungie do.
No.
But Bungie makes some of the most satisfying gameplay in the game.
They do.
And I want to know what that is.
I think they're one of the most interesting teams that we're talking about today, because I always forget that Sony even bought Bungie, because their relationship since that purchase has been so strange for acquisitions, or at least in terms of how gaming acquisitions have gone down previously, because it seems like from everything that Sony has talked about, their acquisition of Bungie wasn't necessarily even for games. It was for the live...
It was for the netcode or something?
Yeah, the netcode, like their live service expertise to help them create other games. Obviously, there are going to be some titles for Sony machines in there somewhere down the line, but it's just been a strange acquisition to the point where they almost feel still like their own independent studio.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether Sony kind of like comes out for this showcase and kind of pushes their relationship a little bit harder to kind of, say, oh, no, don't forget, we actually own Bungie, and they have all of these games coming, or at least a couple new IP, and like you can buy a PlayStation 5 now. And
what if
maybe get that?
Because like you said, they did acquire them for the netcode. There was a whole conversation around Sony pushing more into mobile. A few of the studios they've bought, Firesprite, I think, they're all mobile teams. there might be a segment of the showcase that is just, and here's all the mobile games. And then maybe Bungie oversee that, brought to you by Bungie or something.
I've been so starved for classic, gaming showcases. I'd take a bit of that. I would. I'm so sick of
just for the outrage.
Yeah, man. I'm so sick of 20-minute state of plays that leave no imprint and everyone forgets about as soon as they're done. I want a little bit of outrage. I want a little bit of boring slog to get through. I want them to talk for 15 minutes about the handheld.
You want Mark Cerny, damn it.
I want Mark Cerny to come back.
If you say his name enough, he'll appear.
And do a PowerPoint. I want stuff like that alongside the announcements because like I said, it's been so long since we've had a PlayStation showcase, and it feels so long since we've had a proper E3 period where the hype is sky high, and now going into the showcase, going into the Microsoft one in June, and going into Summer Games Fest. I just kind of want that old school feeling back of, look at all this stuff we have. You're not going to love it all, but we're at least going to give you stuff to talk about.
Yeah, I would welcome that. I'm just curious what they're building because there's so much stuff going on, like I mentioned before, with the acquisitions on the Xbox side. Nintendo is still very much on their own little island. They're always going to do that. And then it's always like, okay, what are Sony going to do to potentially respond to the amount of acquisitions that are happening with Xbox? And they're building, the mentions of their own acquisitions. There's mention of the mobile space. They don't really seem to be caring that much about a Game Pass alternative. There was like an insider leak that Jim Ryan said they don't really consider it much of a competition to anything. So I'm kind of curious, just overall, how they think the future of PlayStation should be, and whether they want the PlayStation logo to be associated with mobile gaming as much as it is first party stuff.
This is what I'm so starved for. Again, I'll use that.
He's hungry.
Again. I'm hungry.
It is lunchtime, to be fair.
I know, we did this before we got food. Can you believe it? This is why I'm rambling all over the place and thinking of crisp sandwiches. No, with Sony, I think they're in like a good position right now. Yes. Obviously, they are. They've got games that are coming out this year that everyone's looking forward to. They're selling PS5s. Crazy amount of PS5s, they're doing well. But what I worry with that kind of success is I worry about complacency. I worry about them getting to the point where they kind of feel like they don't even need a lot of fanfare because they're going to, quote unquote, win anyway.
What was that statistic super quick on Jedi Survivor? Like 81% or 2% of copies were sold on PS5 to Xbox?
At least in the UK, the physical sales of Jedi Survivor, it was 82% on PlayStation 5 and, what's the remaining 18% on Xbox consoles. Microsoft, I want them to do well, but they kind of keep imploding. And I feel like Sony doesn't even have to fight them like they did in the early PS4 days to kind of reassert dominance because they're at the top. And that's fine, and they're going to continue to succeed, and I'm not worried about the games at all, but I kind of want a little bit of spark. I want a little bit of competition. Competition is good for the industry, you know what I mean? Like, I want a strong Microsoft. I want a strong Sony, and I want them battling for our attention. I don't want Sony just to be able to be like, we can sit out an entire year, show you nothing, and you're going to buy our games anyway, aren't you? Like,
and we'll put the price up again.
And we'll put the price up again. That is what it is, but like I said, as an entitled gamer, TM. I want a bit of hype. I want a bit of something. I want a bit of razzmatazz. I want Sony to kind of wine and dine me with a bit of razzle dazzle. Wine and dine me with a showcase. At least Microsoft does that and gets me hyped. Sony in the past year, I think, had big games that they could have shown off, and they were just like, we'll put a state of play out or a blog post near the time, and that'll be done. I don't like that way of doing things.
No, I think that's very efficient, but I think that a lot of because Nintendo Directs have a reputation for giving you something crazy, even if it's at the very end. They could do 25 minutes of random indie stuff, not slagging off indie stuff, but random stuff you've not heard of. And then, hey, by the way, here's a new Tears of the Kingdom announcement or whatever it is. And I feel like the Sony State of Play is rarely ever matched up to that. It was very, very rare that they said anything was available right now, or they didn't end on something that really turned heads. There have been those examples. But if you look at the more extended showcases, that's not been since 2021, you would hope that this is a bigger deal. Yeah. Like you said, they're flying. They're way out in front, but there's still that conversation on what have you got for the rest of the year. We know Spidey's coming. It'd be cool just to fill those things in. Yes.
Yeah, that's it. I would just reiterate what you said because we know what's coming this year. I think they've got enough games this year to sell the PS5. But what comes after that? What comes after the Final Fantasies drop and Horizons dropped and God of War's dropped and Spider-Man 2's dropped? We know we've got Wolverine. But what's the roadmap for the rest of the generation looking like? They had such a strong roadmap for the second half of the generation in the PS4 era. For me, that was far and away better than the first half of the PS4 generation.
Yes.
Won them that generation for me, the amount of new IPs that they introduced, the amount of great sequels that they had. And I want to see that roadmap. I want a little glimpse of it. I want a little taste of it.
What if
Go on.
it's Returnal 2?
Oh, baby! Oh, you talk about being wined and dined. They would just have to stop the show there.
That's a full bottle. I'm just thinking.
That's a full bottle.
That's a full bottle, my friend.
Uncorked it.
With Return, I mean, that game had DLC. It definitely has its fans. The people who played absolutely love it, 10 out of 10. There's enough of a fan base there, and it's been long enough. It's been like 2 years or whatever. There's potential. If Returnal 2 is there, you heard it here first.
Don't give me hope, because that game, like you said, it was really well received from the people who played it. Not by Scott Tilford.
I did play it and hated it. Carry on.
Yeah, well, by some people who played it said it was like one of the best games of the generation. But I don't think it sold that well. Hopefully, it was enough to be a success. But if it was announced, I would be extremely happy, but I'm not kind of holding my breath for it, because I just never know with these kind of quote-unquote smaller Sony teams. If Days Gone wasn't a huge success enough to warrant a sequel, then in this era of we are putting all of the money into the safest, biggest bets possible, I don't know, sadly, if there's room for Returnal 2.
We'll have to wait and see. But the tea leaves are in the right direction. The next game down is Mortal Kombat 12, something that has been mentioned alongside MK's, I think it's 35th anniversary right now, maybe 30th. Either or. Ed Boon's been over on Twitter celebrating Mortal Kombat in general. Still not remaking Shaolin Monks.
Oh, man.
Still not putting Shaolin Monks out.
Ed!
He keeps doing it. He did a Twitter poll the other month asking what people would want to see. Shaolin Monks dominated that poll, Edward, and it's still not available.
I love that, by the way.
Why not?
Time is a flat circle. You say the other month. I'm certain that was like 2 years ago at this point. But still, the point remains, he should have listened to that poll and done Shaolin Monks by now.
Either way, if you follow the insider breadcrumb trail, NetherRealm used to do Mortal Kombat and then Injustice, but there was a whole bunch of shakeups happened. I forget the specific mergers that happened behind the scenes, but things got shaken around. They had to focus on Mortal Kombat 12 instead, and that would apparently be the case. It seems to be the case because it lines up with the anniversary month anyway. I wonder about exclusivity. It's not like MKs have had PlayStation exclusivity in the past, other than like a Kratos character in MK9.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wonder if, oh my God, old Kratos, if you put him in MK12. But yeah, that's something that they could just sort of go, hey, by the way, this game, it would make sense for NetherRealm to hang back and showcase it. It's something like a PlayStation event.
Absolutely. And like Sony's showcases have never been just full of exclusives of first party stuff. Like that's always a huge chunk of it. But they also use this to show off major third-party releases. Like they love to get the Resident Evil games, for instance, at their big events. So I don't see them not getting MK12 if they can, just to have it at their press conference and not get it exclusive or anything like that. Maybe get some exclusive content, but just to have it there, to have the world premiere of that at and tie their brand to a huge franchise that people love. I can see that being there.
Plus, it's been like 4 years since MK11. Yeah. So it's, and all the DLC. I mean, there was a whole thing where Ed Boon and NetherRealm said that they were blown away by how successful the different character packs did. They extended all that stuff. They did a story campaign expansion as well, which I love. I mean, I love MK. It's one of my favorite franchises. But I feel like you could do an MK12 and just reveal where everything's at, because I'm not going to go into spoilers, but the way that MK11 ends is kind of like a fresh start for everything.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious what the franchise even looks like at this point.
Not that it's ever been in a bad spot recently anyway, but MK is in a great spot, and I can see why WB, who again are another team, company, whatever, I knew it was company, entity. Entity, public corporation, who love safe bets and have been, canning a bunch of stuff that haven't been safe bets, or they don't think will make them all of the money. So I can see them saying, yes, give us another Mortal Kombat, because we've got the movie franchise, which is doing well. They've just announced, or it's been rumored that they've cast, lead roles for the new film. Carl Urban apparently is Johnny Cage, if rumors to be believed. The first movie was a success. MK11, of course, like you said, was a huge, massive success. So why not keep that ball rolling in their eyes with a new game?
Insane is it that Carl Urban apparently is going to be Johnny? I love Carl Urban. I love the boys. I love everything Carl Urban's done. I love Johnny Cage. Yeah. They are not the same at all.
What if they could be?
I guess he could be somehow. I don't know. I picture him more like a Ryan Reynolds type energy. I don't know.
He killed us. No.
He could be more playful. I feel like maybe because I've only seen Carl Urban in The Boys for like 4 years now, and he's like very much not Johnny Cage in that show.
I'm trying to think what I've seen Carl Urban in where he plays like a funny guy.
Well, that's the thing, right? When does he ever do that?
Well, he's played it, and it's definitely something, because I can picture him like making jokes and being like arrogant.
Could he have a chest tattoo that says Johnny though?
Maybe.
The TVs have died, but it's okay.
It's okay.
We'll round it out anyway. But yeah, I'm super curious how that stuff comes together.
There they go.
Many things are dying on this studio, but not the audio, not the video that we have. But yeah, let us know what you think down in the comments below of everything that we said. What do you want to see from the PlayStation Showcase, and what kind of games do you want to see as well? For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com.
Josh from WhatCulture.com.
And we're dying in this room, but we'll catch you next time. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.